And yeah, I want to mention, like, one of the first posts I think that I commented on you and how we started to engage on LinkedIn was about, you did a video showing just how misleading particularly these proprietary indexes are that are used in both IUL and fixed index annuities. You did a video about the fixed index annuity side, which is almost, I would argue, worse than IULs. At least there's a little bit of regulation around IUL illustrations. It doesn't seem to be the case with indexed annuities. And you showed these proprietary indexes illustrating just ridiculous numbers. I think it was upwards of like 15%, maybe 13 or something like that. Yeah. But then when you look at the actual the actual performance since the proprietary index went live, which was 3 years ago, 5 years ago, yet they're back testing it 30, 35 years, it's only done like 3 or 4%. And I remember commenting on your post, I was like, I have to be missing something here. That there's got to be a reason that they're illustrating this high, but it's only doing this much. The pushback that I'll get on that sometimes is, oh, well, you have a 240% participation rate. Even with that, which is not guaranteed, it almost always comes down shortly after they get the policy. But even at a 240% participation rate, you're still not getting close to what was illustrated. So I just remember thinking, Tracy, walk me through this, man. What am I missing? Because like these proprietary indexes are just the most misleading thing I think I've ever seen. And that's the basis for a lot of these class action lawsuits, particularly the one on NLG, which Michael and I did a video on. If you guys want to watch it, I'll link down below. We broke down the whole lawsuit and whatnot. But yeah, the proprietary indexes, just talk to me a little bit. You explained it so good on your interview with Michael. Can you share with the audience how these proprietary indexes work, these volatility controlled indexes, which is kind of an oxymoron because if you have a zero floor, you can't lose. You want the volatility. Plus it's an option strategy. You need volatility in order for it to perform. Right. Walk me through this, man.
Sure. So you'll hear kind of like this anonymous term. You'll hear volatility controlled indexes. You'll hear hybrid indexes. You'll hear proprietary indexes. So I want to break down. There is a difference between them. So a volatility controlled index is basically any index that you see that tries to control volatility. And actually in the name, a lot of times will have like some type of percent, like this name, 8%. That means they're shooting for an 8% volatility target. Okay. So like the S&P 500 actually has a kind of a volatility control measure inside of it itself. Okay. Which is 16%. Okay. That's what it is. So that's the VC side. The hybrid side is when you're hybridizing, and most VC indexes are hybrid. It's when you're basically combining like a bond or a bond type structure and equities. And that's actually used to control volatility. Those would be hybridized indexes. And then proprietary indexes obviously can have all of that in it. But then a proprietary one is where you're only getting in that company, and they possibly are that carrier, and they possibly created it with that investment bank, So like these, all indexes are created by investment banks. Okay. So, or in conjunction with an investment bank like Barclays or whoever it is, UBS. So a lot of these insurance companies, what they do is, starting kind of from square one, they'll have a product and they want that product to look really good in an illustration. Okay. Sure. So they will essentially interview multiple banks that they work with, and they'll say, listen, I want to create a index that makes this look really good. And they basically just buy the one or partner with the one that makes the illustrations look really good. And so going back to that, how does it actually work behind the scenes? So a hybrid index or a volatility controlled index, they've been around a long time, actually. Okay. But the difference here is the new ones. So when you are in a product or IUL, any index product, or you can even invest outside in some volatility controlled indexes as well. When you look at that, the way that it's structured, okay, behind the scenes inside of a policy is this. You alluded to it already, which is options. So this insurance company takes premiums in, right? The premiums coming in, whether that's an annuity one lump sum or an IUL over a time, or you can do one lump sum as well if you don't care about the tax side of it, or you have a PDA account, which we won't get into. And that premium goes towards an insurance company's general account. Okay. The general account is mostly made up of bonds pretty safely, unless it's not. And that would be like a lot of private equity driven insurance companies. That would be insurance companies with large positions overseas. That's a whole different ball of wax. Be careful with that. But if it's a good one, it's mostly bonds, a little bit of real estate, a little bit of stock. And the goal there is that they're getting this yield to maturity or this general portfolio yield that is pretty consistent, right? Pretty safe, pretty consistent. So for them, the yield is in the form of income. Okay. So if you have $1 million with them and they're making 7% pretty safely, then they're getting 70 grand a year in income. What are they doing with the income? They're taking the income and they're taking what's called a spread off of it. Okay. It's not necessarily a fee. It's their profit margin or operating costs. Normally it's between 1% to 3%. Let's just call it 2%. And then the rest of it, hopefully, is designed to go towards purchasing an option. Okay. That option, in this case, let's use a 1-year index. Okay. 1-year option. That's how it works. So they're taking this, let's call it 5%. And the 5% is 50 grand out of this $1 million example. And the 50 grand is purchasing an option on $1 million. Okay. Right. So they're leveraging the $1 million that went in to buy the option. Okay. So what happens is they get to buy that index and they get to buy a rate. The rate they get is associated with the relationship they have, but also the whatever they can budget for. So if it's 5%, they probably get a really good rate. By the way, I don't think there's a single insurance company that has a 5% budget, but let's just pretend there is.
Sure.
Then that rate comes in two forms. It either comes in the form of a cap or a participation rate, right? So if it's a cap rate, that means that you will make up to this cap on this index. If it's a participation rate, you will make a percentage of whatever it gained. Okay. Right. And then however that option performs over 1 year gets credited to the policy. Okay. So the insurance company actually doesn't take anything from the performance unless they have what's called a spread on top of that, or a margin, they call it, which is, I don't think it's as common. Well, if you're using them, you probably shouldn't. I'm not a big fan of spreads unless they're really low. So
yeah, and usually you'll see those with uncapped indexes, right? You'll see spread charges. I've seen it 6.5% spread charge on uncapped S&P 500 index or something like that.
Yeah, and a lot of times the reason why the spread is there is because they're trying to buy up the option. They're trying to put more of that towards funding a better rate. So if it does have a spread, chances are you'll get a better participation rate because of that, right? So,
and real quick, can we explain what the spread charge is for those who are not familiar with it? That's basically if it's a 6.5% spread, if the market goes up 20%, then you're supposed to get what would that be? 13.5%.
Yeah,
right. So they keep the first 6.5% of the performance of that index.
Exactly. Yep. So yeah, if whatever index you're buying the spread on, you basically shave it off the top, but it's not a fee, because if it was a fee and that index returns 0, they take 6.5 from your account. Right. They don't do that. It's only off of the gain. Right.
Right. So, and that's an important distinction, because there are some multipliers and things like that people use, and then they show oh, we did 60% this year, and it's because they had a multiplier. But if the market goes down, you still pay for those, whether the market goes up or down. Doesn't matter.
Exactly. Yeah, we call those buy-up rates. You're buying up a rate for a fee. Spread, it's a buy-up rate as well a lot of times, okay? Right. So if that index returns nothing or goes negative, right, then you just get a 0 on your account, but it does not mean you didn't lose money, because all the costs and everything inside of the policy comes out of your account value, right? Yep. So that's basically the back end of how all that works. And then the problem with that is that's all complicated. And 99% of consumers aren't going to understand that, because 99% of agents don't understand that.
We've probably lost a bunch of people already. That's kind of the point.
Yeah, that's the point, right? You can summarize all that and just say, okay, it's super complicated. Got it, right? Yeah. So how are you ever supposed to understand it? Well, if you're with a good advisor, then you don't necessarily have to. They should understand that, right? Right. So now we move into, okay, Tracy, how does my policy actually credit, interest? What indexes do I pick? We get into the hybrid index side. So that's how it works. Why do insurance companies use hybrid indexes? Why don't they just use the standard NASDAQ or the standard S&P or the standard Russell? Well, they do, but a lot of times those are super expensive indexes. The more the volatility, the more expensive the index is. Okay. Right.
Because the options are more expensive to purchase.
You got it. You got it. Yep.
So there's an option budget that is generated by the general funds, that's created by the general fund. That's used to purchase options, but options fluctuate in cost based on volatility.
You got it. Yep. Yeah. So that 5% that you're budgeting in a hybrid index might buy you a 200% participation rate. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's less volatile. It's a lot cheaper to buy versus an S&P option that might only get you a 50% participation rate, right?
Right.
So when you're explaining this to a client and you have no idea what you're talking about, right? You would much rather sell them on 200%, right?
Sure. Sounds
versus
better.
50%. Sounds better.
Right.
Well, now we go back to two things. One, what's it actually returning, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if the S&P did 26% last year, what did hybrid indexes do? Not 26%,
Right.
probably not even half. We had some hybrid indexes do well sometimes, but over a long period of time, the S&P ends up wiping the floor with a lot of hybrid indexes, right?
Right.
That's why we only use the S&P, NASDAQ, and Russell because they're pretty much beta to each other. And we know that going back to studies like SPIVA, it's going to beat out pretty much every other investment over a long period of time, right?
Sure.
So we want volatility, right? So the problem here, and this is kind of the lawsuit side, is that people are expecting that if the market goes up, the market being everybody thinks of the market as what is the market? It's the S&P 500. That's what everybody basically equates to the market, right? Dow or S&P. So if the market goes up, you want to see a return, right? The problem is that a lot of agents aren't explaining that this 200% is not following the same curve of the market. Like some of these are inverse to the market. Some of them are following things like bonds, right? So if interest rates go down, they do really terrible. If interest rates go up, or opposite. So if interest rates go up or down, either way, they go up and down, right? They have an inverse relationship with interest rates. So interest rates go up, they go down. Interest rates go down, they go up, right? So those can do well sometimes, but is it still going to beat the S&P? And actually data shows no, it's not even going to get close to the S&P over like even a short period of time, 5 years probably.
Right.
So then you get 200% of what? 200% of 1%, 2% returns. So in that lawsuit, the person returns 0%. The market was up 27. Actually, I think in that segment, the market was up over 30%. That's the problem, right? And so that's why people are getting shafted in a lot of these products, because those products it is extremely important for them to perform halfway decent. If they don't, you don't offset the costs inside of them. And if you know anything about the time value of money and just how sequential returns work, the first 5 years of anything is unbelievably important, right? You want to get decent returns in your first 5 to 10 years. So when you have like 1-2 years into a policy, 3 years into a policy, and you're not getting performance, you could have just shafted that policy for years and years and years.
Right. Yeah, 100%.
What's up, my fellow wealth creator? Thank you so much for checking out this clip from the Millennial Wealth Creator podcast. If you'd like to watch the full podcast, there will be a link down below in the description. Make sure to also check out the additional tools, training, resources that I have in the description as well, just to help you along your journey. Thanks again for checking out the clip, and we'll see you in the next one.